Jamie Steele O'Connor and Lisa Red Harris weren't just names on the streets of Liverpool, they were legends in a brutal game where trust meant survival and betrayal meant death. Behind the towering estates of Toxteth, Croxteth, and Kirkdale, these two ruled vast cocaine empires, weaving a web of power, violence, and secrets that gripped the city in fear. This is the story of how ordinary neighborhoods became battlegrounds for ruthless drug lords, and how the lines between friend and foe, right and wrong, disappeared in the shadow of white lines and red bricks. Liverpool's sprawling estates of Toxteth, Croxteth, and Kirkdale have long been known as tight-knit communities with strong working-class roots. But by the late 20th century, these areas began to change. Rising unemployment, crumbling infrastructure, and cuts to social services created an environment where opportunity was scarce and frustration simmered beneath the surface. Many young people found themselves trapped, with few paths to a better life. It was in this environment that the first cracks in the social fabric appeared, and the foundations were laid for something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. What started as small, local drug dealing soon escalated into something much bigger. Cocaine, once a rare and expensive luxury, began to flood the streets. Its allure was powerful, promising quick money, status, and escape from the bleak realities of estate life. Young men who had grown up playing football on council estates now found themselves drawn into a world of dealers, couriers, and enforcers. The drugs brought in new money, and with it, new power struggles. The estates, once symbols of community spirit, turned into battlegrounds where different groups fought for control over lucrative corners and street corners. The estate's dense layout, with their maze of back alleys, high-rise blocks, and tightly packed rows of houses, made them perfect for hiding illegal activity. For law enforcement, these areas became difficult to police. Drug lords exploited this, turning neighborhoods into their own little kingdoms. Their influence seeped into every corner of daily life, from corner shops to nightclubs. Control over the cocaine trade wasn't just about drugs, it was about control over the community itself. As cocaine grew more popular, the stakes became higher. Those involved were no longer small-time dealers, but part of organized, ruthless networks. Violence increased, often erupting suddenly and with devastating consequences. What began as a way to make ends meet turned into a fierce struggle for dominance, forever changing the character of Liverpool's estates and setting the stage for a brutal underworld to take hold. As the demand for cocaine grew in Liverpool, so did the opportunities for those willing to take risks. The city's long history as a major port made it an ideal entry point for drug smugglers. Containers arriving at the docks often concealed shipments of high-purity cocaine, hidden among legal goods. These shipments weren't just small batches. They were large quantities destined for the streets of Liverpool and beyond. Smugglers worked in teams, coordinating with contacts both locally and internationally, to keep the flow steady and avoid detection. The drugs' arrival marked the beginning of a new era for the city's criminal underworld. With cocaine more available and affordable, a new breed of dealer quickly emerged. Unlike the older, small-scale dealers who worked quietly in the shadows, these newcomers were bold and aggressive. They recognized the chance to make quick, vast profits, and weren't afraid to use violence or intimidation to protect their turf. These dealers weren't just street-level operators. They were part of larger organizations that controlled entire neighborhoods. They had couriers who transported drugs on foot or by car, enforcers who dealt with threats or rival gangs, and managers who arranged deals with suppliers. This system operated like a well-oiled machine, with each person playing a role in the cocaine empire. The cocaine trade brought wealth, but also a dangerous hunger for power. Dealers flaunted expensive cars, designer clothes, and luxury watches, symbols of their new status. For many young people in the estates, becoming involved in this world became a way to escape poverty and gain respect. However, the rapid growth of these operations attracted the attention of law enforcement, who began to see cocaine as the root of much of Liverpool's violence and crime. But cracking these networks was difficult. The dealers were smart, constantly changing routes, using encrypted phones, and staying one step ahead of the police. Despite the risks, the cocaine business continued to expand. It wasn't just about the money, it became about control. Whoever controlled the supply could dominate the streets, influence the community, and build an empire. The cocaine gold rush had transformed Liverpool's estates into battlegrounds for wealth and power, setting the stage for years of conflict and crime that would shock the city to its core. As the cocaine trade grew more lucrative, control over territory became a deadly obsession. Rival gangs saw the estates of Toxteth, Croxteth, and Kirkdale not just as neighborhoods but as prized battlegrounds, where power was measured by how much drug territory you controlled. Each patch of streets meant access to customers and cash flow, making turf wars inevitable. These battles were brutal, sudden, and often left lasting scars on the community. Violence became a daily reality. Shootings, stabbings, and beatings were no longer isolated incidents, but regular occurrences. Gangs used intimidation and fear to maintain control, and anyone who challenged their dominance faced severe consequences. Innocent bystanders often found themselves caught in the crossfire, turning once lively estates into places where people locked their doors early and looked over their shoulders. The drug lords were ruthless, willing to eliminate anyone who stood in their way, whether rival dealers, informants, or even former friends. But these conflicts were more than just random violence. Beneath the surface was a carefully planned war. Gangs formed alliances with some groups while betraying others. Deals were made and broken in secret, and the battle lines shifted frequently. The violence was a tool to send messages, to assert dominance, to punish disloyalty, or to claim new territory. Every attack was calculated, intended to weaken rivals and strengthen one's own position. The police struggled to keep up. They faced not just dangerous criminals, but an entire community living in fear and distrust. Witnesses were often too scared to come forward, and investigations stalled. The encrypted phones and secret codes only made it harder to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the estates themselves seemed to transform, once vibrant communities now overshadowed by crime and fear. Despite this, the gangs continued to fight for control, fueled by the enormous profits cocaine brought. The turf wars left a trail of destruction, broken families, lost lives, and shattered neighborhoods. It was a brutal chapter in Liverpool's history, where the cocaine trade wasn't just a business, but a violent battle for survival and supremacy. The estates had become war zones, and the war was far from over. As the cocaine empires grew, so did the need to stay one step ahead of the police. The drug lords knew that open communication could lead to arrests and raids, so they turned to technology for protection. Encrypted phones became the secret weapon of Liverpool's drug networks. These devices, unlike regular smartphones, scrambled messages so only the sender and receiver could understand them. This created an invisible world where deals were arranged, territories discussed, and threats issued, all hidden from law enforcement. The encrypted phones allowed dealers and kingpins to communicate with a level of secrecy never seen before. Instead of meeting face-to-face or using risky phone calls, they could send coded messages from anywhere. This made it much harder for the police to track conversations or gather evidence. Even when phones were seized, cracking the encryption was nearly impossible. This new layer of protection gave drug lords confidence to operate openly, expanding their reach without fear of immediate detection. These phones became part of a larger, complex network linking couriers, enforcers, and suppliers. Messages often contained code words, symbols, and references that only insiders understood. For example, certain numbers or phrases would indicate where a shipment was arriving or which gang controlled a specific street. This secret language created a digital fortress that kept the network tightly connected, but nearly invisible to outsiders. The police tried to adapt, developing new techniques and cyber tools to intercept messages and decode the language of crime. Still, the encrypted networks were a step ahead, constantly evolving and finding new ways to communicate securely. This technological arms race added a new dimension to Liverpool's drug wars, turning battles from the streets into cyberspace. The rise of encrypted communication not only protected the drug trade, but also made it more efficient and ruthless. It allowed the cocaine empires to coordinate large-scale operations with precision and speed, increasing their power and influence. What was once a street-level business had transformed into a high-tech criminal enterprise. The estates of Liverpool were no longer just physical territories, but parts of a vast hidden digital web controlling the cocaine game. The massive profits from cocaine sales brought one major challenge: how to hide the vast amounts of cash without attracting attention. Drug lords couldn't simply keep stacks of money in their homes or on the streets. It would raise suspicion and invite police raids. To solve this, they built complex money laundering operations that turned dirty money into seemingly legitimate income. This process became a vital part of the cocaine empire, allowing criminals to enjoy their wealth while staying under the radar. One common method was to invest in local businesses. Bars, nightclubs, car washes, and small shops became fronts where drug money could be mixed with real earnings. For example, a nightclub might report higher than actual sales, allowing dealers to explain large cash deposits as profits from customers. These businesses served two purposes. They made the money appear clean and offered social spaces where deals and meetings could happen unnoticed. Some business owners willingly participated, while others were pressured or threatened into cooperation. Property investment was another popular tactic. Drug lords bought houses and apartments, sometimes renovating or renting them out. These properties provided a way to store money in physical assets that could be sold later. Luxury cars and expensive watches also served as status symbols and hidden forms of wealth. Flashy displays of wealth sent a message: power and success, in a world where appearances mattered. The laundering operations were carefully organized, often run by trusted associates or family members who understood the risks. These moneymen managed complex financial transactions, sometimes moving cash through multiple businesses and accounts to cover their tracks. They also used offshore accounts and shell companies to further complicate the trail. Law enforcement agencies recognized money laundering as a key target to disrupt the drug trade. However, the intricate networks and layers of deception made investigations difficult and lengthy. Then, the once untouchable drug lords began to feel the pressure. High-profile arrests sent shockwaves through Liverpool's cocaine empire. Key figures who had controlled entire estates were suddenly behind bars, their carefully built networks unraveling. These arrests were not just victories for law enforcement, they signaled the beginning of a major power shift within the city's underworld. However, the fall of these kingpins was far from straightforward. Many were skilled at using legal loopholes to delay trials or avoid harsh sentences. Their lawyers exploited the complexities of the justice system, buying time and sowing confusion. Meanwhile, those still free used intimidation tactics to silence witnesses or disrupt investigations. Threats, violence, and bribery became common tools in their fight to maintain control. Even in prison, some continued to direct operations through secret messages or trusted contacts on the outside. As the old leaders faced these challenges, new players quickly moved to fill the vacuum. Ambitious younger dealers saw an opportunity to rise, often more ruthless and unpredictable than their predecessors. This scramble for power led to further instability and violence, as gangs battled to take over abandoned territories. The cocaine trade became fragmented, with smaller groups competing fiercely, but lacking the organization that once gave the empire its strength. This chaotic transition period revealed just how deeply entrenched the drug trade was in Liverpool. It wasn't simply about a few criminals, it was a sprawling network connected to everyday life on the estates. The arrest of top figures exposed weaknesses but also highlighted how easily others could step in to continue the cycle. Law enforcement faced an uphill battle. Dismantling the empire required more than just removing individual players. Despite the setbacks, the fall of the Titans was a critical moment. It showed that even the most powerful drug lords were not invincible. The arrests disrupted supply chains, slowed down operations, and gave communities a glimpse of hope. But the battle was far from over. The cocaine empires had shifted and changed, and Liverpool braced itself for the uncertain future of its underworld, one where new leaders and new conflicts awaited. Behind the scenes of Liverpool's cocaine empires, there was a side of the trade, often overlooked: the role of women. While the headlines focused on the male drug lords and violent turf wars, women played critical, sometimes hidden roles that were essential to the operation and survival of the drug networks. These women were not just bystanders. Many were deeply involved in managing finances, enforcing rules, and even controlling parts of the drug trade themselves. Some women acted as trusted managers of money, handling cash flow and laundering profits through legitimate businesses. Their involvement allowed the drug lords to focus on expanding territory and dealing with rivals while trusting that the financial side was secure. Others worked as enforcers or runners, carrying messages, transporting drugs, or collecting debts. Their ability to move without suspicion gave them an advantage in a world where being visible often meant danger. In some cases, when male leaders were arrested or imprisoned, women stepped up to take control. They became the new power brokers, running operations with intelligence and brutality. These women understood the risks but were determined to protect their families and their wealth. Their leadership challenged stereotypes about who could hold power in the drug trade, revealing a complex and sometimes ruthless side of the underworld. The women involved often faced difficult choices. Many balanced the dangerous demands of the drug trade with family life, sometimes struggling to shield their children from the violence and chaos around them. Their stories highlight the complicated nature of loyalty, love, and survival within the cocaine empires. Some were deeply loyal to their partners or families, while others used their position to gain independence and power. Despite their influence, the women of Liverpool's cocaine trade rarely received public recognition. Their roles were kept quiet, hidden behind the louder, more visible violence of the male-dominated gangs. Yet, their impact was undeniable. They helped maintain the operations, supported the drug lords, and sometimes even reshaped the criminal landscape. Their stories reveal a hidden layer of the cocaine game, one where gender roles blurred and power took many forms. The widespread violence and corruption gripping Liverpool's estates forced the city to face a harsh truth. The cocaine epidemic was more than just a criminal problem, it was a community crisis. The damage ran deep, affecting families, schools, and neighborhoods that had already struggled with poverty and neglect. The city's leaders, law enforcement, and local organizations realized that tackling the drug trade required more than arrests. It demanded a complete shift in how the problem was approached. Community groups sprang up, working tirelessly to offer alternatives to young people caught in the cycle of drugs and violence. Outreach programs focused on education, job training, and mentoring, aiming to give the youth hope and a chance at a better future. These groups understood that without addressing the root causes, poverty, lack of opportunity, and social exclusion, the drug trade would continue to thrive. Their efforts often faced uphill battles, but became essential parts of the city's healing process. Police strategies also evolved. Specialized units were formed to focus solely on drug networks, using new technologies and intelligence gathered from informants to target suppliers rather than just street dealers. Partnerships between law enforcement and community leaders improved communication and trust, encouraging more people to come forward and cooperate with investigations. This shift helped disrupt supply chains and reduced some of the turf violence that had terrorized neighborhoods. Politicians and city officials launched initiatives aimed at improving living conditions in the estates. Investment in housing, infrastructure, and public services sought to reverse decades of decline and provide a foundation for safer, more stable communities. These efforts, while slow and sometimes controversial, represented a commitment to addressing the social factors that allowed the cocaine trade to flourish. Despite these combined efforts, the fight was far from over. New gangs and dealers continued to emerge, adapting to changing circumstances and finding ways to exploit weaknesses in the system. The cocaine trade remained a significant challenge for Liverpool, reflecting the ongoing struggles faced by many post-industrial cities. Liverpool's reckoning with its drug-fueled underworld was a long and difficult process. It revealed the complexity of the problem, the resilience of its communities, and the determination of those fighting for change. The city's story became one not just of crime and violence, but of hope, recovery, and the ongoing battle to reclaim its streets. The story of Liverpool's cocaine empires is far from over. Even after years of arrests, community efforts, law enforcement crackdowns, the city continues to face new challenges in its fight against drugs and crime. The cocaine trade, while disrupted, has not disappeared, it has evolved. New technologies, changing social dynamics, and shifting criminal networks mean that the battle for control of Liverpool's streets is ongoing and unpredictable. As encrypted communication becomes more advanced, and drug trafficking methods adapt, law enforcement faces an ever-changing enemy. Dealers now use the internet, social media, and more sophisticated tactics to avoid detection. This digital evolution makes policing more complicated, but also opens new opportunities for innovative surveillance and investigation techniques. The fight between criminals and the authorities has moved into a new arena, one that requires constant vigilance and rapid adaptation. Meanwhile, Liverpool's communities continue to rebuild and heal. The estates of Toxteth, Croxteth, and Kirkdale, once synonymous with violence and fear, are slowly changing. Grassroots organizations, local leaders and residents are working tirelessly to create safer environments and better futures for young people. Education, employment programs, and improved public services aim to break the cycle that pushed many into the drug trade in the first place. These efforts show that recovery is possible, even after years of hardship. But the legacy of the cocaine trade leaves a lasting mark. Families torn apart by addiction, violence and loss carry the emotional scars, and the city's reputation as a drug hub remains a challenge to overcome. The red bricks of the estates and the white lines on the streets serve as reminders of a turbulent past, a past that still echoes in the lives of many. Liverpool's story is one of resilience and resistance. It is a tale of a city that refuses to be defined by its darkest moments, and instead fights to reclaim its future. The cocaine empires may have shaped a chapter of its history, but they will not write the ending. The struggle continues, a complex, difficult fight where hope and danger coexist, and where every step forward counts in the battle for the soul of the city.